Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session on BAInsights. We're talking about service design, and I'm really pleased to have two excellent guests with me to talk about our very topic. So let's get into it and ask for some introductions. Starting with yourself, please, Jonathan, if you would.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning to everyone. I'm Jonathan Hunsley. I'm the Service Development Director for a company called Assist Knowledge Development. That basically means I do research into new and emerging disciplines, such as service design. I'm the co-architect of something called the A4Q Certified Service Designer qualification. Paul have worked with IRM to found Service Design Conference Europe, and I'm really pleased to be here with one of the co-founders, Colleen, of the new Service Design Forum. So really pleased to be here. Thank you, John.
Excellent, Jonathan. And a nice segue to Colleen as well.
That was lovely, Jonathan. Thank you, John. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's really great to be here with yourself and Jonathan. So, my name's Colleen Henderson. I am the public sector industry lead for Sword UK. So, we're a digital and technology services company. So, what we do is make the best use of technology with our customers, make sure that they're doing the best they can, doing more with efficient capabilities and effectively hoping that we will save them money in the process as well. So prior to joining Sword, I worked exclusively in the public sector in local and central government roles. First worked in Aberdeenshire Council, highlighted the discipline to me and supported me to learn and grow in that space. And I took that mandate and introduced service design into the local authority and grew that capability within the organisation. So in addition to that, I am a fully qualified business analyst. I achieved my full BCS diploma a long time ago. And so I'm an advocate for good design in all its forms, really.
Excellent, thank you, Colleen. So, and nice to touch on the subject of business analysis as part of the introduction as well.
Mhm.
But as we'll discuss, there's a close relationship between service design and business analysis as well. And you two are obviously super qualified to talk about it, which I'm glad to hear. And having attended your session at the last BA conference as well, I definitely know you're the right people to have on this topic and talk to us. I'm looking forward to it. So maybe we should start with a fundamental question in terms of what is service design?
Okay, do you want me to take that one, John?
To you first, John, please. Yeah.
Okay, so there's lots and lots of different answers. I'm really worried about going first because Colleen is gonna she's gonna give a different angle, and it depends kind of who you ask, I suppose. One of the challenges is there's different definitions of it. I'd say it's a new and emerging discipline that doesn't have a single definition at this point. There there are emerging definitions and people are working on it and there's different perspectives. So one of the ways that I would define it would be by taking a service view in terms of what are the services that are offered by a service designer. And so I would say service designers get involved in investigating situations, understanding problems, opportunities. They should be doing all of their work alignment with the business that are familiar. Those are two services that are also offered by business analysts. Where it starts to differ then is the service designers are often a lot more customer or user focused. So customer experience analysis, understanding the voice of the customer is a service that's offered by service designers. It's also offered by a discipline known as user research, and there's specialists in this space. Then the final three services I'm going to mention are service definition, so defining new services or improvements to existing services, service experimentation, prototyping, getting feedback, and then service deployment. They're heavily engaged in stakeholder engagement as well. And I could have given you another three different answers, John, to that very same question, but I took the service framework answer. So hopefully that kind of gives a flavor as to the type of work a service designer.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I mean,
Don't
it's,
be nervous.
it's
Well, I'll take a kind of holistic view, I guess, because I think, John, your definition was really detailed and it's fantastic. I suppose I'll be a little bit obtuse, I guess, and say it's service design is the design of services, but very much designing with and for the people who are going to use them, rather than assuming that we or the business know what is needed and bringing that bias into that space. So there's a strong focus on co-creation, because the best way to design a service is to ensure that the people who have that lived experience of need are part of that design process. Because often I think we design, and I've said this a few times. I think I actually said it when I did the panel session as well. That we often, the mandate to design a service is very much fixed around have already, rather than thinking genuinely and fully about defining and understanding the problem that we're trying to address from the perspective of the user. And so there's some really clear methodology attached to service design. If you want to have a look at that double diamonds piece, it's a clear route and pathway to, first of all, holistically diverging all the information you have, and we talk about discovery, so genuinely learning everything you can about the problem that exists. And there's lots of synergies into business analysis as well, because we do a lot of that in the business analysis space too. And narrowing down and converging all of that information to define the problem that we have, and doing that in partnership with the people that are going to use the end service, whatever that service is, because it comes in many forms. And then it's moving into that development space, and considering all the potentials, and that's kind of tying into that options analysis, options appraisal piece. What might be the range of things that we could look at and explore here. What service design does is it opens a space for quite a lot of creativity as well. There's a lot of lateral thinking baked into design thinking. And with a lot of the pressures that we have around us at the moment, sometimes doing the thing you've always done or taking a direct route isn't always the answer. And so I think there's quite a lot of interesting and useful tools that fall into that service design capability toolkit that allow you to create and explore and give you the permission to do that. And then finally, it's into that delivery space as well, and that convergence and looking at those solutions and that fail fast testing. And that process isn't linear. There's a lot of iteration and looping back in that space. But ultimately, what comes out at the end of that is something that there's a strong business case for service design, because ultimately you're in a good place to design the right thing. And you've thought about all the different variables and all. So yeah, I get quite passionate about this stuff, because I think at the heart of a lot of what we do in service design as well, it's about equity, the level playing field for all perspectives, to come in, and that hierarchical approach that you sometimes find in more traditional structures is something that is countered in that design space.
Excellent. And I mean, you've both covered the introduction to what service design is so well. Really left me with the scraps, as it were, as what.
Sorry.
So I'm not going to worry about that at all. But what is evident from what you both said as well is the connectiveness between service design and some of those other concepts that we think about as BAs and across change. It was interesting that you brought up service design as an example. Design thinking rather as an example. Yeah. It's a topic we've spoken about before on the insights. So it's quite nice to see that this is just another of those frameworks that's connecting some of the dots, as it were, that we see as BAs. And then that focus on problem statement, thinking about the customer experience and the user experience, makes me think that on top of what you've all said as well, some of that service design needs to be somewhat evidence-based and trying to get underneath sort of the reality of what people are perceiving to really understand, what is the data to support or not support the service. But as you said, not much more I can add on that, so I won't. We talk about what service design is, but so I wonder, Colleen, why should BAs be aware of or consider service design themselves, you think?
So I think, as I mentioned, it's around that space. additional tools and techniques to help really drive home that business justification for doing something a particular way. I think both approaches have a lot of complementary elements, and from a service design perspective, it's that user-centric piece that Jonathan spoke about as well. That service design, it's an emphasis on creating engaging and seamless experiences, and I think that's a critical component of service design, and very much for users based on their needs and preferences. And I think that definitely aligns with the whole role in business analysis of understanding user requirements, so you can see those synergies to ensure that the services that are created are effective and also user friendly as well. But I think service design also involves mapping out that entire user journey in a similar way, but it's very much focused on those pain points, opportunities for improvement, that continuous improvement cycle. And I think from a business analyst perspective in particular, you can benefit from that because you're then ensuring that all aspects of that design piece and that solution piece fit together and work efficiently. I think it's also about the collaboration piece. Service design definitely focuses on collaboration among stakeholders. It's about continuous feedback, it's about iteration, and it just allows some new tools to come into that space and help enhance the development and the business case development as well. So I think BAs can definitely benefit from the holistic piece around that and how things work together. And it also helps in the innovation space as well. Very often we find when we're doing service design activity that the preconceived ideas about how certain things should work or progress are completely that you may not have anticipated. Sometimes we look at different layers of user. We think about the business users rather than the end users and customers. And so it's almost about driving us to always commit to thinking about the very end user of a particular approach and genuinely seeking out their opinions and their experiences rather than taking it that it's enough to think about a business user in a process, and how that changes the small nuances and insights that come from that can really change a perspective or change an approach. So I think that collaboration piece, it's just giving further permission, further support and further tools to help with the collaboration piece that builds that business justification. I think as well it's about strategic alignment. So I think service design is very much about services and business objectives, but it's also about user needs, and that just creates an optimal space and supports business analysis as well. So I think it's very much about how do you make sure that you're marrying user satisfaction, business goals, and holistically approaching that in a way that is going to give best results.
And I'm glad you sort of talked about user needs there as well, Colleen. I mean, it's evident that the BAs can get that benefit of really applying the same mentality that you use in service design to make sure they're always thinking about the customer experience, what it is the customer actually needs, is the solution relevant to the customer, as well as, of course, the end user the users between that is helpful for the customer lens as well. So, Jonathan, what would be your opinion in terms of why BA should be aware of service design?
So for me, just picking up on some of the things that Colleen's talked about there, if you're a business analyst, you're a change professional, and you're interested in strategically aligned outcomes for your organization and its stakeholders, its customers and users, then you should be interested in this related discipline known as service design. So it does help with driving innovation and creativity in the exploration of problems, opportunities, and driving out solutions. There's also this concept that Colleen mentioned around co-creation. And so where that comes from is coming from service science. Service science engineering and management is the full name of the academic discipline. But it's basically this realization that we cannot ever deliver value, but it is the customer, the user of a service, the stakeholder of a service, that is the ultimate arbiter of whether or not we have or have not delivered value. So it opens us up to feedback. So there's a huge alignment with agile principles here in terms of collaboration, testing and learning, and improvement. The other things that the service design discipline, I think, majors on are things like systems thinking, systemic thinking, understanding people's perspectives, understanding that those perspectives might be different and that we might have some really difficult problems that we're trying to deal with, sometimes known as wicked problems, or if you're using something like the Cynefin framework, okay, complicated, complex problems that we really don't have the answers to, and we need to probe, sense, and try and make sense of the context that we're in. And then the other thinking approach that I think underpins service design in my worldview is lean thinking. So relentless focus on the customer, improvement of quality, reduction of waste, all in alignment with the strategic goals and objectives. So for me, this is like a must-have toolkit for any business analyst. You should be interested in these thinking approaches and the supporting tools, techniques, frameworks, because it's going to help you do your job for your organization. The other thing I've come across, and I don't know if you've seen it, John or Colleen, sometimes the BA is excluded from meetings because they're not seen to be senior enough to be in that meeting. And rarely in some organizations, but in those same organizations, the service designers are sometimes invited in. It depends on the organization and its culture, but if you really want to make an impact in your organization, I'd say that this professional discipline can give you the tools to help you make that positive impact on your organization.
It certainly sounds so, and I think you're right on the point of including the BA within the meetings in this sense, because even if there is a dedicated service designer, some of the concepts we're talking about are very much aligned. I mean, you know, it's interesting you talk about systems thinking, lean thinking, and value co-creation, to name just a few examples without me reading everything. They're definitely concepts that as BAs we're all hopefully always thinking about, and they will very much impact our day to day as well. So any way we collaborate as part of the delivery team to make sure that, as you say, that the customer's getting the value, we need to be part of the conversation.
The other thing I just want to mention is you might be working with a service designer. So if you understand a bit about service design, you're going to be able to collaborate because you've got a shared understanding and a shared kind of set of techniques. And so can really help if you're not intending to be a service designer, but you're working with service designers, you want to understand it a bit more. Understanding the language can only be of benefit from a collaboration perspective with service designers.
I agree. It makes me think, Jonathan, that if there's any BAs out there that are working with service designers but are not entirely clear on what the service designer is doing, what a great opportunity to go and speak to them and find out. In the same way you would go and talk to the development lead or the test lead or the business, go and talk to the service designer as well and find out how you can help what they're doing and vice versa. And naturally, I think this part of the conversation leads on to sort of the benefits of service design. I know from what you've both said, there's obvious correlations to making sure the customer is getting the right sort of value when the product is delivered. But I'm assuming it's not as simple as that there are other benefits to service design. And I wonder, Jonathan, would you mind just outlining your perspective on benefits of service design?
This is a big one to tackle. It depends on the organization, how it's employing its service designers and what they're there to do. But I think there's some huge benefits to an individual organization using service design. And I'm going to share, we all engage as customers with organizations that offer us products or services. As a customer or user of services, I often find that I'm disappointed with the customer experience. A organization that makes a promise to do something and then doesn't do it or doesn't respond to communication. I've got a pet hate of chatbots at the moment, where they're deployed and they send you in an endless loop that doesn't help you resolve your query. And then you go to the FAQ page and it says ask the chatbot, and the chatbot sends you to the FAQ page, just as an example. And all you want is a phone number to speak to someone. They've hidden it and you can't get the phone number. And it could be for a really important service. This could be a health outcome. It might be a financial outcome that you're trying to achieve as a customer. So there's a benefit in terms of delivering your promises to your stakeholders, your customers, if you're interested in doing that as an organization, then I think you should be interested in service design. The other big half of this argument, though, is that it can drive huge efficiency savings. So often organizations grow organically. They merge, they acquire new acquisitions and new organizations. They launch new product lines, and often those are done without design. And so you get these kind of monolithic organizational constructs that, if you look at it, they've got separate HR departments for each of the product lines, or separate kind of complaints processes, or whatever it might be. Service designers are looking systemically around that, and they provide, looking at that and saying, well, how would we design that if we were going to do that in an optimal customer focused way? So there's a potential for absolutely huge efficiency savings for organizations if they're constrained in terms of budgets, in the public sector, charity sector. If you're a financial organization, so for example, you're in a commercial sector, if you want to deliver your services more efficiently than your competitors, why not look at this discipline known of as service design? Because it might be able to help. And that's quite a big sales pitch, I know, John, and I'm sure there's skeptics around it. It's not a silver bullet. I do want to say that as well. It's a lot of hard work, the collaboration that's required to drive out these customer-centric solutions or services that are efficient and aligned with strategy. There's a lot of work there. It's not a magic wand to fix all organizational issues, but I think it's a good place to start. If you're encountering any of those issues that I've just mentioned.
It certainly seems so. And then you mentioned the point about the silver bullet. I mean, business architecture, business analysis aren't themselves either. So service design on a parallel with those, if you're thinking about it, trying to implement its approaches, then it feels like it's logical that you would actually benefit from it. And the point you were making earlier about calls, and the experience you get as a customer. I think we've all been on those type of calls where you're rooted around the organisation. And I speak for myself here, but sometimes when I'm on those calls, I think, right, is this organisation I'm waiting to contact someone I can just ditch and find an alternative competitor? Because if I could, I would just ditch them straight away, because it's very frustrating. But I won't get on my soapbox about that. I will hand over strategically to Colleen, so that Colleen can share her view on the benefits as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was nodding along to a lot of what Jonathan was saying. I mean, I quite like a chatbot. I really don't like picking up the phone unless I have to, which is weird because I am I like to chat, but just, I don't know, something about phoning people these days. But yeah, a good chatbot is a great chatbot, but as you say, they more often than not, they're a stop point at which you just give up, I guess, and maybe that's what some organizations are looking for. I think, just picking up on what Jonathan was saying, I think for me, in terms of benefits, I think a lot of it for me is about company culture. If I see a company that is investing in service design, my sense is they are a mature organization that has really thought about the customer being at the heart of what they want to do. But equally, when you start to see things through a service design lens, it cascades into every part of what you do. It's really hard to go back to thinking a different way. And I remember that from a lot of the training that I did when the Scottish Government were rolling out Scottish approach to service design. And all of a sudden it's like it lights a fire under you, and you start to just question everything. And there's something about almost service design being a discipline of professional curiosity. You just get into everything. And it creates a space where you have a clear mandate to go and understand properly and deeply. And I remember one of my colleagues, a service designer that I brought into my the last organisation that I worked in, and we were looking at business models for various things, and he was just like, I'm just going to jump in a car and I'm going to travel around and really understand what this looks like from the perspective of a user. And he travelled all over Aberdeenshire, getting a really deep understanding of utilisation of different services and assets, and staking buildings out, watching people really understanding. And I think it's those kinds of examples of how you draw out those kinds of insights into the optimization conversation, and people can't argue with that kind of grounded knowledge. You know, when you're trying to speak to somebody about a business case, or you're trying to get across what an insight is, and you say, well, actually, I've been there. I have physically been in that space, or I have walked the walk in terms of this user experience. I've spoken to end users. This is my recommendation. It's very hard as somebody perhaps in a leadership space who hasn't done that to argue, because the information and the findings are compelling. So I think there's something around culture and mature culture that we don't perhaps as a business have all the answers, and we're willing to open the floor to what that looks like from the end user's perspective, including the chatbot journey and so on. Have any of the sort of senior leadership in a particular organisation been in the loop of doom and understand what that looks like, and it might change it for them. So I think there's something there about that professional curiosity that we should all have when we are at the pinnacle of business, and not lose sight of that. So I think for me, it's definitely something around that and the business case for service design. You know, the benefits that come from adding those insights and capabilities into that, and layering that alongside the business analysis piece, and how complementary those things are together, and how much stronger that particular approach becomes when you add in those tools and techniques. So for me, it's definitely around that operational efficiency. There's also about things like competitive advantage. Now, that doesn't play into every single sector. In the public sector, it's not about competitive advantage, but it is about customer experience. It's about how can we make this service as good as it can be for people who are potentially very vulnerable and need the right kind of support and treatment. Organisations that embrace that service design approach, they're definitely better positioned to differentiate themselves in a market, and it's that high quality and user-centric approach that sets them apart. And it's also that brand reputation piece as well that comes in there. You know, if you put your users in front of your products and they can genuinely speak to an experience, then it changes everything. I think it's also about risk, in terms of mitigating risk, because you have a deep understanding of the decisions and the investments that you're making as an organisation and how they're going to impact. Is that the right place to invest and approach? And I think it definitely helps to address and reduce risk associated with service delivery. So yeah, I think it's that culture, and Jonathan, you spoke about the feedback piece as well, but it definitely promotes that continuous feedback loop, that focus on improvement, and incorporating all of that into the design process, and it's adaptation. And again, that's the sign of a mature organisation that is continually looking to adapt and evolve and pivot based on that continuous loop of information. So for me, I think it's about the financial benefits, but also the risk mitigation that comes from having a culture that supports service design and practices it.
It feels like as well, based on what you both said, that service design is an opportunity not just to view the customer as the consumer of something at the end of the process, but actually someone that can be an active participant in the process, as long as it's to their benefit and their interests. And I think probably if you give more benefit to the customer, they'll probably be happy to take more responsibility throughout that user journey, rather than just be seen as a consumer of something perhaps that doesn't always hit the mark.
Yep.
So really, yeah, quite a thought-provoking topic, of course.
I think, yeah.
I wonder, I mean, based on what you've both been saying, I feel like there's a lot of obvious interaction and connectedness between business analysis and service design, some of which we've already mentioned. I wonder, Colleen, is there any additional points you might want to make about that interconnected nature of a service designer versus a business analyst? Or indeed, perhaps we could bring in business architect at this point as well. You know, so is there, you want to answer it from any of those perspectives, that link between BA, service designer, business architect?
I think for me, just taking that BA architect design space, I think it's very much about strategic alignment. So how do these things all fit together? How do we make sure that, you know, the strategic goals of the organisation also fit with the end goals and needs of a user? And service design comes into the mix there to really focus on that user-centric position. And ultimately, I think it's also about process integration. So how do these things fit together holistically? But then from a process perspective as well, it's also about, the service design process, the blueprints, the process mapping, and the interactions that flow through those processes from a user perspective. So I think that the design sort of approach and the service design blueprint approach, that can be integrated with those business architecture models, and how that all fits together to build that rich picture. It ensures that there is effective design, it ensures that there's efficiency there, and that the right outcomes are implemented. So I think for me, again, there are a number of synergies across architecture, business analysis, and service design. It's also, again, back to things like the continuous improvement piece, that continuous improvement and adaptability piece. Service design is very much about the user feedback space, and how that helps to refine services. And then when you move into the architecture piece, it's about performance and metrics, and optimizing process. So I think there's a lot of crossover, a lot of synergy, and a lot of complementing approaches there that all fit together to build a really rich picture. And if you are able to pivot and concurrently utilize a range of those different approaches, you put yourself in a position where you can build a really compelling and rich picture of an outcome, of a process, and build that continuous business justification.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Now, Jonathan, what would be your perspective on that same point, the link between business analysis, business architecture, service design?
So it might be that some of the listeners, some of the viewers are practicing as service designers without calling it that. So they might be taking a customer-centric, outcome-focused approach that's strategically aligned as a business analyst. They might already be doing service design, but they've not phrased it that way in their head. There might also be some business architects doing exactly the same thing. They're trying to design and deliver customer-centric services in line with the needs of the business. It really depends. So I'd say don't get too hung up on the role title and think more about the outcomes that you're delivering. And there's some people who will be doing these things already, even though they're not calling themselves service designers. I would say the very first service design piece of work I did, I had the job title business architect. But to do that job, I was using a business analysis toolkit. So how might that be? Well, each of these individual professional disciplines are looking at the same questions from different angles with different languages, different techniques. So the questions that I think they're asking are Mr. Kipling's Six Wise Men. Why, what, how, where, when, and who. They're looking at the answer to those questions with different thought processes. And if we can build shared understanding across these individual professional disciplines, we might have a chance for better collaboration towards the organization's outcomes. In terms of, I started my answer earlier by describing the service view of a service designer. The business architect services differ. So we're familiar with the BA service framework that Deborah Paul put together in her PhD thesis, popularized by the book that Christina Lovelock and Deborah Paul published, Delivering Business Analysis. We've got this service framework, which I talked through earlier. The business architects are offering different and unique services. Some of them overlap with the business analyst and the service designers, problem investigation, feasibility assessment, business case development. They're the same services that they're offering, just from a different angle. The business architects tend to, though in my experience, get more heavily involved in business architecture governance. So the governance of the decisions within the individual change initiatives, so that they're all aligned to the strategic view, the strategic target states that we're aiming for, principles against which we make decisions, as an example. Blueprint development and maintenance. And in this particular space, this is a huge opportunity for the business architects and the service designers to collaborate, because the service designers might be putting together service blueprints. Where does that fit in the repository of knowledge that the business architects are maintaining? And we should be thinking about the alignment there. Value streams are a technique that are used by business architects, service designers, and business analysts And again, where's that being maintained, that knowledge, capabilities, capability models, again, it's a technique that we can use to leverage knowledge and help with driving out the customer-centric services. Business architects tend to be more heavily involved in target operating model design. That's also a service that business analysts and service designers can offer. And then strategic roadmap development, I would say, would be the final service for the business architects. And again, business analysts and service designers can help deliver that service and also sometimes offer that service independently of business architects. So there's a whole wealth of different services that are on offer. And I think the goal should be, let's work together, let's collaborate to solve these difficult, challenging problems, opportunities we've got in our organizations, and drive it forward, as Colleen said, in alignment with the strategy of the organization. Rather than, and I suspect this at the moment, and I've seen quite a lot of it, the individual roles not talking to each other. There's in some professions, there's a snobbery towards other roles, and that's not helping the organization drive outcomes. There's internal politics between these roles. I've heard people talk openly about turf wars between the individual roles. I don't see how that's helping the change profession at all. It's not helping organizations drive outcomes. And we need to call it out, and we need to work together in a collaborative way to solve these complex challenges we've got in our organizations. So I'll stop there. Hopefully that gives you a bit of insight there, John.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so many points to cling on to and think about there, Jonathan. I mean, I think what is, I guess, the overwhelming feeling from listening to you both really on that particular question is one of reassurance, really, that that what we're talking about here aren't concepts that will be unfamiliar to many. And actually, as we think about the service design lens and we think about that customer experience, it's important to also think about the structure that comes with the business architecture view and the process, think about functions and solutions that BAs naturally bring in. But if we're all collaborating, all combining, then it feels like the natural outcome is customers get as close to optimal experience. The organisation's set up and is more efficient to deliver that experience. The BAs and business architects and those working in service design all get the recognition, because I guess what comes with customer satisfaction is probably more revenue, but who knows? Yeah, definitely one of reassurance without me reading through all the other excellent points that you both made as well. So I feel a bit guilty now. I've also obviously asked you so much and taken from you so much information already, but are there any further or final tips you might share to guide the viewers on how to approach service design, if you feel like there's any extra tips left to give? And we'll start with you, Colin, first, I think.
Yeah, in terms of extra tips, I think it's just really, it's tying back into that culture piece and that optimization piece around genuinely taking the time to understand the users and their perspective. Whatever the discipline is, I think there's absolute value there. And I guess just going back to Jonathan's point around the professional snobbery, I've definitely seen some of that as well. And I sometimes wonder if it's tied into just a lack of clear role definition. And that is something, and I've seen that a few times, that actually some roles can bleed into each other in certain organizations where the capabilities or the expectations aren't clearly defined. And I think it's absolutely incumbent on an organization to make sure that they've clearly defined what those roles look like, tying it back into the disciplines and the methodologies and the approaches that are teach. So I've definitely seen it, but I think that there's absolutely space for each of those disciplines to bring enormous value to a business. And when you get that right, I think it benefits everybody. So I would definitely say there are some challenges, and if that's something that anyone is experiencing in that space, I would definitely say do call it out, but also come with a solution in mind about how that can be improved and what needs to happen. Because I think, from my perspective, sometimes it is just about a little bit of territorial. Sometimes it is, well, I want to demonstrate my value. my ability across a range of different things. So I think having those conversations and making sure that there's clarity of approach and the value that you will bring gives you the space to focus deeply on what you're going to bring to the table in terms of value in your role. So in terms of tips, yeah, I think that focus on end users, no matter what, is really valuable. The preferences, the pain points, that professional curiosity, again, is something that I think is really valuable. It's become almost a little harder as we've become more hybrid in our approaches, and then sometimes that willingness to just get out and be tenacious can be hard. It can feel harder, I think, than it ever has before. So I think it's about moving into that space where you do have that clear mandate to go rooting about and to deeply understand. And I would say, don't ask for permission. Proceed until apprehended in that space and bring the insights back, because it's incredibly valuable. And I guess as well, there's a number, we've covered a lot actually in terms of different techniques and approaches. So I don't think I'm going to dive back into sort of blueprinting and prototyping and so on. There's a wealth of information out there in terms of how best to approach. I suppose it depends whether it's specific techniques or holistically how to approach. And we maybe touch on that a little bit as well. But yeah, I think being prepared to adapt as well. You know, being agile, staying agile in that wider sense, to evolve that service design capability and discipline as the business evolves around it. Because again, I think for lots of organisations it is a maturity journey, and it can be hard fought sometimes, and I know that well. To try and bring that discipline into the space. And as Jonathan said at the beginning, it's been around for a while, but it does feel like it's still getting out of the blocks in a lot of spaces. And I think there's so much value. And I know Jonathan has spoken before about the BA forum and the tiny little acorns from which it began, and now the scale of it. So I think there's definitely a lot we can do to support that discipline to grow and to flourish. And you know, I'm a huge advocate, so I remain steadfast in my perspective around it.
So thank you, Colleen. Jonathan.
So I'm not, loads of great points there from Colleen. So it's difficult for me to add to that, but I'd say the professional curiosity point. Be interested, find out more, go talk to a service designer, listen to a podcast like this one, and pick up a book and just find out more. The other things that I'd say is, in terms of tips, build relationships. So service design, the co-creation piece, doesn't come for free. You've got to invest time in getting to know people and building relationships, building trust. We have to be authentic. We have to sometimes assert boundaries, but integrity and perseverance are all kind of things that we need to help ourselves grow in this space. The other thing I'm just going to mention, though, as well, is a growth mindset. First time you attempt to do something with a service focus, it might not be perfect, but you've got to think, right, what have I learned from that, and how might I continue to improve? How might you continue to enhance your organization's services forevermore, which is what we're talking about? You need a growth mindset, because you're not always going to be perfect. You are going to try things out, a prototype that doesn't work. And the feedback's going to say objectively that service, your expectation, it's not going to work. Dyson prototypes the bagless vacuum cleaner over 5.5, I think it's like 5,500 times. So you've got to have a growth mindset, test and learn, test and learn. And I just want to pick up on I think Colleen mentioned it. She might have used different words, but don't ask for permission, beg forgiveness. If you're doing things in alignment with strategy that helps customers, stakeholders, and is in alignment with the goals of the organization that you work for, you're doing the right thing. I'd say beg forgiveness, don't ask permission. I will put a little asterisk on that, though. Sometimes you can get yourself into trouble. Sometimes there's internal politics. If at all in doubt, seek advice from someone that you trust, that you can have a conversation with. But as a general mantra, yeah, beg forgiveness, don't ask permission. I do want to share something as well. There was an organization, a public sector organization, that did a £27 million change initiative, and they were told not to talk to customers of that thing that they were building. They deployed the new service. It wasn't a surprise that the customers didn't like the new service. So they then did a further £9 million uplift on that service. So I know we did the business case earlier, but
Yeah.
talk to customers. Please go and talk to customers and find a way to find out. Don't make assumptions.
It's such a simple point, but it's amazing how many times it's missed. Um, only recently I was involved in something that was badged as a customer focus initiative. And my question was, how many customers have we engaged with or got permission to engage with? It's like, well, we don't need to involve those right now. And so bit of an odd mindset. If you're trying to help the customers, you probably know who they are first, be able to represent. I think it goes back to that voice of the customer mindset, know your customer, all of those concepts that the pair of you have touched on several times throughout. I think as we're almost out of time, it feels fitting that the last question, and we'll keep it brief one really, as you've told us so much about service design. But Jonathan, I'll start with you. Where can we hear more if there's more to hear about about service design? I keep wanting to say business analysis, but service design.
So get involved in business analysis as well and find out more. But podcasts, do a search on podcasts. Quite a few different ones out there. I'll give a shout out for the BA Brew, where there is certain of those podcasts focused on service design subjects. There we go. See, John's. I love that you've got one of the mugs. Brilliant. If you take a look at the Assist Knowledge Development website, in our learning zone, we've got a dedicated section to service design, and there's a whole wealth of articles, presentations, podcasts, other things. Get yourself along to Service Design Conference Europe, which is happening in June 2025. I think Colleen's going to be there on a panel.
Yeah.
So Colleen and I will be there. I'm doing a talk as well. Get to know service designers, find someone, talk to them. They're collaborative people. If you're interested, send either Colleen or myself an email and say you'd like to get involved in the service design forum. It's for thought leaders in the service design discipline. It's new. There's not a lot out there in terms of social media content on it, but do just get in contact with people and start your learning in whatever way you can. Would be my tip, my advice.
Thank you, Jonathan. Colleen, do you have anything else you might add in terms of how to hear more?
No, I think Jonathan's covered everything I would say. I think there are some fantastic professional courses out there, definitely through Assist in particular. I think anything that allows you to do on-the-job training in that space is well worth it. It also helps you with your requests into your employer, for example. If you're professionally curious about it and you want to do something, if you continue to work in a particular profession, but you can layer on some of that service design capability and training at the same time, I think that's a definite win-win, and only serves to enhance your own professional kind of capabilities and quality. I think for me, again, definitely speak to service designers who are already in the profession if you're curious. There are some fantastic networks. I think the design network, sometimes service design can be a hard space to be in, and your network is everything for helping you work through challenges and share battle stories of how you've got to a certain place, and even bringing in the benefits of it and introducing use cases and stories about the influence of service design into the organisation. So I think the network definitely, and speaking to people. I will say there are books and tools out there, but I think just given the nature of the discipline and the approach, I think those conversations are really, really the meaningful spaces to start your discovery in.
I agree. And it seems like the overarching message is there is a community out there. There are people out there. There are conferences. There are books, of course. Go and reach out and find out more. And actually, it means you're not alone if you're doing service design or new to service design. You can evolve your expertise as we go. And of course, as you both said, to an extent, don't ask permission. Go and reach out to these people and speak to them. So that feels like an excellent point to stop. Time as well is another good reason to stop. But all that remains is really just to thank you both for a huge amount of insight that you've able to squeeze into 55 minutes. So thank you for that. And yeah, very much look forward to hearing from you both, seeing you at conferences and various other activities that I'm sure will relate to service design and more. So thank you again.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, John. It's been an absolute pleasure.